What devastating tragedy at your child's school was easily preventable? The answer to that question haunts me every single day, and I need to share this story with you because what happened to my daughter Emma could happen to any of our children if we don't pay attention to the warning signs. My name is Sarah, and I'm a single mother living in Oakwood, Illinois, trying to navigate this world while raising my 15-year-old daughter on my own. Emma has always been my sunshine, the kind of girl who would leave little notes in my lunch bag before I went to work, who would dance in the kitchen while we made dinner together, who would tell me everything about her day before bed. That all changed 5 months ago when she started her freshman year at Oakwood High School. At first, I thought it was just normal teenage adjustment. She became quieter, spent more time in her room, started wearing baggier clothes. I told myself she was just finding her place in a new school, that high school was tough for everyone. But then I started noticing other things. She would take different routes home, sometimes arriving 30 minutes late. She stopped wanting to go to the mall on weekends, stopped meeting her friends at the park. When I asked her about it, she would just shrug and say she was tired from all the homework. It wasn't until parent-teacher conferences in October that I got the first real clue something was seriously wrong. Her English teacher, Mrs. Martinez, pulled me aside after our meeting and whispered that she'd noticed Emma seemed anxious in class, especially when certain boys walked past the classroom door. She said Emma had asked to change seats 3 times, always moving further from the door, closer to her desk. When I pressed for more information, Mrs. Martinez looked uncomfortable and said she'd already reported her concerns to the administration, but suggested I talk to Emma directly. That night, I made Emma's favorite meal, homemade mac and cheese with the crispy breadcrumb topping she loved, and we sat at our little kitchen table just like we used to when she was younger. I asked her gently if anyone was bothering her at school. She pushed the pasta around on her plate for the longest time before finally looking up at me with tears in her eyes. She told me about 3 senior boys who had been following her since the first week of school. They would wait for her after her last class, follow her through the hallways, making comments about her body, about what they wanted to do to her. They knew her schedule, knew which bathroom she used, knew where her locker was. My heart shattered as she described how she'd started holding it all day rather than use the bathroom, how she'd been eating lunch in the library storage room because they'd found her in the cafeteria, how they'd figured out her route home and would drive slowly beside her, making obscene gestures. I held her as she sobbed, promising her I would fix this, that she would be safe. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove Emma to school myself, marching straight to the principal's office. Miss Henderson was a woman in her 50s who kept checking her phone while I explained what was happening to my daughter. She nodded absently, typing something on her computer, then looked up with what I can only describe as practiced sympathy. She assured me the school had a zero-tolerance policy for harassment and that she would look into it immediately. When I asked what that meant specifically, what steps would be taken to protect Emma, she gave me a vague response about investigating all claims thoroughly and following proper procedures. I left that meeting with a sick feeling in my stomach, but I wanted to trust the system. A week went by with no word from the school. Emma was still terrified, still changing her routes, still refusing to use the bathroom. I called Ms. Henderson's office daily, only to be told by her secretary, Ms. Patricia, that the principal was in meetings or out of the office, but would definitely return my call. She never did. I sent emails documenting every incident Emma reported to me, creating a paper trail of dates and names and specific behaviors. The responses were always the same generic template about taking all concerns seriously and following district protocols. Finally, after 2 weeks of being ignored, I showed up at school during lunch and refused to leave the office until I spoke to someone. The vice principal, Mr. Torres, eventually came out and told me they had spoken to the boys in question and the boys denied any wrongdoing. He actually used the phrase, "boys will be boys," and suggested that perhaps Emma was misinterpreting friendly behavior or looking for attention. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked if they'd reviewed security footage, if they'd interviewed any witnesses, if they'd done anything beyond asking the accused if they did it. He shifted uncomfortably and said privacy laws prevented him from sharing details of their investigation. That afternoon, Emma came home with a tear in her backpack. When I asked what happened, she broke down completely. The boys had cornered her outside the art room, one of them grabbing her bag, while another pressed close enough that she could smell his cologne, whispering what he was going to do to her if she kept trying to get them in trouble. The third one just stood there filming it on his phone, laughing. She said a teacher walked by but didn't stop, just looked away and kept walking. That was when I knew the school was not going to protect my daughter. I started documenting everything obsessively. I bought Emma a small recording device to keep in her pocket. I took pictures of every torn piece of clothing, every suspicious bruise from being shoved into lockers. I created a binder with printed emails, call logs, dates, and times of every incident. I reached out to other parents to see if their daughters had experienced anything similar. 3 mothers quietly admitted their girls had complained about the same group of boys, but said they didn't want to make waves or risk their daughters being labeled as troublemakers. The weekend before everything went to hell, Emma begged me not to make her go to school on Monday. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, dark circles under her beautiful brown eyes, jumping at every sound. I held her on the couch, running my fingers through her hair like I did when she was little and had nightmares. I promised her I would fix this, that I wouldn't let anything happen to her. I emailed Ms. Henderson one more time, marking it urgent, stating that if the school didn't take immediate action to protect my daughter, I would be forced to explore other options, including legal action and going to the media. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching our mood perfectly. Emma could barely eat breakfast, just picked at her toast while staring out the window. I offered to let her stay home, but she said she had a test she couldn't miss. I should have listened to my instincts. I should have kept her home. But I dropped her off like always, watching her walk through those doors with her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself invisible. I spent the morning at work distracted, checking my phone constantly, texting her every hour to make sure she was okay. At 12:47 p.m., everything changed. I was sitting in the break room eating a sad desk salad when my phone lit up with a series of frantic texts from Emma. Each one made my blood run colder. They're in the girls' bathroom. They're trying to climb into my stall. Please help, Dad. I'm so scared. She'd called me Dad in her panic, something she used to do when she was very little and confused. My hands shook as I immediately called the school, already grabbing my keys and running for the parking lot. The phone rang 4 times before Ms. Patricia's bored voice answered. Oakwood High School. How may I direct your call? I was already in my car, starting the engine. My daughter is trapped in the bathroom. 3 boys are climbing into her stall. You need to get someone there right now. There was a pause on the other end. Which bathroom, ma'am? Her tone suggested I was inconveniencing her lunch break. 3rd floor, I think. I don't know. Just find her. Her name is Emma Walsh. They're attacking her right now. I could hear the hysteria creeping into my voice as I pulled out of the parking lot, tires squealing. Ms. Patricia sighed audibly. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but I cannot leave my desk unattended. The principal is currently unavailable as she's on her lunch break. I'll be sure to give her the message when she returns. I nearly screamed. Are you insane? My daughter is being attacked in your school right now. Go to the bathroom and help her. Ma'am, she said in that condescending tone people use when they think you're being hysterical, please calm down. I'm sure it's not as serious as you think. Students aren't allowed in opposite gender bathrooms. Your daughter's probably just upset about something. I hung up on her, my mind racing. Emma hadn't texted again. 5 minutes had passed since her last message. I ran 3 red lights getting to the school, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. All I could think about was my baby girl trapped in that bathroom, terrified and alone while the adults who were supposed to protect her sat at their desks following protocol. I called 911, but was told they needed more specific information about the threat level before dispatching officers to a school. I threw my phone on the passenger seat and pressed harder on the gas pedal. 8 minutes later, I abandoned my car diagonally across 2 parking spots in the bus lane and ran through the front doors of the school like my life depended on it. Ms. Patricia looked up from her computer, her mouth opening to undoubtedly tell me about visitor sign-in procedures, but I was already past her desk, running down the hallway. I could hear her calling after me about security protocols, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered except getting to Emma. My feet pounded up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Other students stared as I passed, some pulling out their phones to record the crazy lady running through school. The 3rd floor seemed impossibly far away. When I finally reached it, I could see the girls' bathroom at the end of the hall. The door was closed. As I got closer, I could see something that made my stomach drop. Someone had jammed a wedge under the door from the outside. They had deliberately trapped her in there. I grabbed the door handle and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. The industrial door wedge was doing its job perfectly. I pressed my ear against the door, and what I heard next will haunt me forever. Emma was crying, begging them to stop. I could hear male laughter, the sound of fabric ripping, and then Emma's cries became muffled screams like someone had covered her mouth. I pounded on the door with both fists. Emma, I'm here, baby. Mommy's here. I kicked at the door wedge, but it was jammed solid. Looking around frantically, I spotted a fire extinguisher on the wall. I grabbed it and started hammering at the door handle, the metal clanging echoing through the hallway. These were the new reinforced doors they'd installed after the shooting at Riverside High 2 years ago. Doors designed to keep attackers out were now keeping me from saving my daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me as I swung that fire extinguisher again and again, my arms burning, sweat dripping into my eyes. By now, Ms. Patricia had made her way up the stairs, panting heavily, her face red with exertion and indignation. "Ma'am, you need to stop this immediately. You're destroying school property. I'm calling security." "Give me the key," I snarled at her, not stopping my assault on the door. She took a step back, apparently shocked by the fury in my voice. "I don't have bathroom keys. Only administration has those. The principal is, let me guess, at lunch?" I finished for her, giving the door one more futile swing. Without another word, I took off running toward the administrative offices, the fire extinguisher still in my hands. Behind me, I could hear Miss Patricia on her radio calling for security backup. I didn't care. They could arrest me after I saved my daughter. The principal's office was on the second floor, and I flew down the stairs so fast I nearly fell. When I reached her door, I could see her through the window, sitting at her desk, calmly eating a chopped salad while scrolling through what looked like shopping websites on her computer. I pounded on the door so hard the whole wall shook. She looked up slowly, as if a parent frantically trying to get her attention was a daily annoyance. She held up one finger in a wait-a-moment gesture, then deliberately took another bite of her salad, chewing slowly while maintaining eye contact with me. That was when something inside me snapped. I lifted the fire extinguisher and swung it at her door window. The safety glass spiderwebbed, but didn't break. She jumped up, knocking her salad onto the floor, lettuce and cherry tomatoes scattering across her carpet. I swung again, and the glass finally shattered, falling in 1,000 tiny pieces. She screamed, backing against her bookshelf. I reached through this broken window, ignoring the pain as small shards cut into my arm and unlocked her door from the inside. Blood dripped from my arm onto her cream-colored carpet as I stormed to her desk. "You're insane!" she shrieked. "I'm calling the police!" I didn't respond, too focused on yanking open her desk drawers, searching for keys. The third drawer had what I was looking for, a massive ring of keys labeled with little tags. The security guard, Jim, appeared in the doorway, his hand on his radio, probably calling for real police backup. "Ma'am, you need to stop what you're doing right now." But I was already pushing past him, keys jangling in my bloody hand, running back to the third floor. My arm throbbed and left a trail of red droplets on the white linoleum floor. None of it mattered. Only Emma mattered. As I reached the third floor again, my heart nearly stopped. The bathroom door was open, the wedge was gone. I rushed inside to find my daughter curled in the corner of the handicapped stall, her clothes torn, her face bruised, bodily fluids in her hair that made me want to commit murder. She was trying to cover herself with her arms, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. I fell to my knees beside her, pulling off my cardigan to wrap around her. "Baby, I'm here. You're safe now. Mommy's got you." She couldn't speak, just clung to me, her body convulsing with sobs. I pulled out my phone to call 911 with one hand while holding her with the other. The principal appeared in the doorway with Jim, the security guard, right behind her. "You assaulted me," she announced, her voice shrill. "Jim, he could have killed me with that fire extinguisher." I was still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, trying to explain that my daughter had been sexually assaulted, that we needed an ambulance immediately. The principal kept talking, pacing back and forth in the bathroom doorway. "You've traumatized my entire staff. Every student on this floor witnessed your violent rampage. Do you have any idea what you've done?" She pulled out her own phone, and I heard her speaking to someone about a violent parent who had attacked her and destroyed property. She gave my description and used words like unstable and dangerous, never once mentioning why I had done what I did, never once looking at Emma huddled on the floor. When the police arrived, she pointed at me first. "That's her. She's the one who broke into my office and threatened me with a weapon." 2 officers moved toward me while 2 others pushed past to get to Emma. One paramedic gently convinced Emma to let him examine her while his partner started documenting her injuries with photographs. I tried to explain to the officers about the 3 boys, about the months of harassment, about the school's failure to protect her. The older officer, Officer Martinez, listened but kept saying we'd need to discuss this at the station. My hands were still bleeding from the glass, dripping onto the bathroom floor. The principal stood in the hallway, loudly telling anyone who would listen how I'd gone crazy, how I'd attacked her unprovoked, how she feared for her life. Jim showed various people his phone, apparently having recorded my property damage, but conveniently not what led to it. They loaded Emma onto a gurney, covering her with a white sheet. She kept her eyes closed tight, her hand gripping mine until they had to wheel her away. I tried to follow, but Officer Martinez blocked my path. "Ma'am, you're being detained for assault and destruction of property. We'll need you to come with us." I watched helplessly as they wheeled my baby away while I was treated like a criminal. Students lined the hallways, phones out, recording everything. By evening, I was the crazy mom who attacked a principal, not the mother desperately trying to save her daughter. At the station, they processed me like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photographs, the whole humiliating process. My bloody hands had to be cleaned and bandaged before they could get clear prints. When they finally gave me my phone call, I didn't waste it on a lawyer. I called the hospital to check on Emma. The nurse could only tell me she was being examined and that I'd need to come in person for more information. I later learned a victim advocate named Patricia had stayed with Emma through the entire rape kit examination, holding her hand and explaining each step so she wouldn't be scared. This stranger showed my daughter more kindness than her entire school had in 5 months. They released me that evening with a court date and charges of destruction of property and assault. The desk sergeant mentioned the principal was graciously not pressing the more serious assault charges at this time, as if I should be grateful. I practically ran to my car and drove straight to the hospital, finding Emma in a room on the 3rd floor. She'd been cleaned up, but her eyes looked hollow, empty. She flinched when I moved too quickly toward her bed. "Don't touch me," she whispered, "but please don't leave." I pulled a chair close to her bed, letting her know I was there without crowding her. We sat in silence until Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived. She interviewed us separately, starting with me in the hallway. I gave her everything, the 5 months of harassment, every email I'd sent, every dismissive response from the school. I told her about the other girls who'd complained, about the boy with the camera, about the teacher who walked by and did nothing. She took notes without much expression, but I saw her jaw clench when I described Ms. Patricia refusing to leave her desk while my daughter was being attacked. When she went to interview Emma, I paced the hallway like a caged animal. Through the door, I could hear the soft murmur of voices, but not the words. A nurse brought me coffee that tasted like burnt water, but I drank it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. The discharge planner arrived with a stack of resources about trauma, therapy, victim services. She rattled off information about safety planning and follow-up appointments while my brain struggled to process any of it. All I could think about was getting Emma home, getting her safe, and figuring out how to help her through this nightmare. The drive home was silent except for Emma's occasional whimpers when we hit bumps in the road. When we pulled into our driveway, she stared at the house like she'd never seen it before. I helped her inside, and she went straight to the bathroom, locking the door. I heard the shower running for over an hour, heard her sobbing over the sound of the water. When she finally came out, she was wrapped in 3 towels and her skin was red and raw from scrubbing. She looked at her bedroom door for a long moment, then turned and went to the living room instead, curling up on the couch with every throw pillow we owned built like a fortress around her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair across from the couch, watching her fitful sleep, jumping every time a car drove by. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications I didn't check. By morning, I had 17 missed calls from the school, 3 from unknown numbers that left voicemails calling me a violent criminal who should be locked up, and 1 from my boss asking why I'd missed work. Emma woke up screaming at 4 a.m., fighting invisible attackers. It took 20 minutes to calm her down, to convince her she was home, she was safe. The next few days blurred together. Detective Rodriguez called to say she'd pulled the security footage from the hallway outside the bathroom. It clearly showed all 3 boys entering the bathroom moments after Emma, one of them placing the door wedge. The timestamp matched exactly with Emma's text to me. She'd also gotten the principal's phone records, showing she'd received multiple calls during her lunch break that she'd declined to answer, proving she could have helped but chose not to. None of this made Emma eat more than a few bites of soup or stop flinching when I moved too quickly. A week later, I met with attorney Michael Chen about the criminal charges against me. He listened to the whole story, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. He said we could argue extreme circumstances, that any reasonable parent would have done the same thing. But he also warned that the principal had connections, that she was already spinning the narrative in her favor. The local news had picked up the story of the violent parent who attacked a principal, conveniently leaving out why. The security video Jim had taken was already circulating on social media, carefully edited to show only my property damage. Emma's first therapy appointment with Dr. Rachel Chen was scheduled for 2 weeks after the assault. I drove her there, waited in the car while she went inside for her intake session. She came out an hour later looking exhausted but slightly less broken. Dr. Chen had taught her some grounding techniques for when the panic attacks hit. She showed me the breathing exercises so I could help when needed. It was the first tiny step on what I knew would be a very long road to healing. The criminal case against me moved forward with mechanical indifference to the circumstances. I had to appear in court, standing before a judge who looked bored as the prosecutor described my violent rampage through school property. My attorney argued that I was a mother trying to protect her child from imminent harm after being systematically ignored by the administration. The judge seemed more interested in the property damage dollar amount than the reason behind it. I accepted a plea deal for misdemeanor property damage, 6 months probation, and 200 hours of community service. It felt like being punished for trying to save my daughter's life. Meanwhile, the case against the 3 boys moved at a glacial pace. Detective Rodriguez had to interview them multiple times because their stories kept changing. One claimed he was never there. Another said Emma invited them in. The third admitted to being present but blamed the other 2. Their wealthy parents hired expensive lawyers who filed motion after motion trying to get evidence excluded. Emma had to relive her trauma over and over, giving statements, identifying voices on the audio her little recorder had captured. Each time left her more exhausted, more withdrawn. The school district's response was predictably bureaucratic. They launched an internal investigation that seemed designed to find no wrongdoing. The Title IX coordinator, a man named Richard Brennan, called to discuss the incident with careful language that never admitted fault. He offered Emma alternative schooling options, including online classes or transfer to another school, as if the solution was to remove the victim rather than address the system that failed her. When I asked what consequences the boys would face, he cited privacy laws and ongoing investigations. 3 months after the assault, one of the boys' lawyers contacted my attorney about a plea deal. The youngest attacker, who had just turned 17, was willing to admit to assault in exchange for juvenile court handling and sealed records. It wasn't justice, but it was an admission of guilt. The other 2 continued to fight the charges, their lawyers arguing everything from consent to mistaken identity despite the video evidence. Emma listened to the updates with hollow eyes, nodding mechanically when asked for input. Our days developed a rhythm built around Emma's healing. Morning therapy appointments twice a week, afternoon tutoring sessions because she couldn't return to school, evening walks around the neighborhood when the panic attacks got too bad. She started sleeping in my bed again, something she hadn't done since she was 7. I'd wake to find her sitting up, staring at nothing, reliving that day. We'd make chamomile tea and sit at the kitchen table until the sun came up, not talking, just being present together. The first small victory came 4 months after the assault. Emma laughed at something on TV, just a small chuckle, but it was the first genuine emotion besides fear and sadness I'd seen from her. She caught herself immediately, as if happiness was something forbidden now, but I saw a flicker of the girl she used to be. That night, she asked if we could get a pizza, the first time she'd shown interest in any specific food. We ordered her favorite, pepperoni with extra cheese, and she managed to eat 2 whole slices. The legal proceedings dragged on. The 2 boys fighting charges eventually took plea deals when faced with Emma's testimony and the mountain of evidence Detective Rodriguez had compiled. They got probation and community service, their records sealed because they were minors. It felt like a slap in the face, but at least they had to register as sex offenders. At least there was some acknowledgement of what they'd done. The school settled out of court, paying for Emma's therapy and tutoring without admitting wrongdoing. Ms. Henderson was quietly transferred to a desk job at the district office. Ms. Patricia retired early. 6 months after the assault, Emma started online school. She could work at her own pace, take breaks when the anxiety got too bad. Some days she could focus for hours, diving into her studies like they were a lifeline. Other days, she couldn't get out of bed, couldn't stop crying. I took family medical leave from work, then eventually quit entirely to be home with her. We survived on savings and the settlement money, focusing only on healing. Friends drifted away when I couldn't explain why we'd disappeared. Family members whispered about overreacting, but Emma was breathing, Emma was trying, and that was all that mattered. A year later, we planted a small garden in the backyard. Emma chose each plant carefully, researching what would grow well in our climate, what would attract butterflies. She spent hours tending to those plants, watering them, talking to them sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. The therapist said it was good, that nurturing something else helped rebuild her sense of agency and control. I watched from the kitchen window as she carefully tied up the tomato plants, her movements still cautious but purposeful. 18 months after the assault, Emma told me she wanted to try attending community college. Just one class to start, something in the evening when there would be fewer people. We toured the campus together, mapping out safe routes, identifying exits, finding quiet spaces she could retreat to if needed. The first night of class, I sat in the parking lot for the entire 3 hours, ready to rush in if she needed me. But she made it through, came out with color in her cheeks and notes in her notebook. She'd even spoken once in class, answering a question about the reading. Now, 2 years later, we're still healing. Emma takes a full course load at community college, planning to transfer to a 4-year school next year. She wants to study social work to help other girls who've been through what she experienced. She still has bad days, still sleeps with 3 locks on her bedroom door, still flinches sometimes when men walk too close. But she also laughs with her study group, goes to movies with the few friends who stuck around, has started talking about maybe getting a part-time job at the bookstore near campus. I've returned to work part-time, something flexible that lets me be available when she needs me. The criminal record from my property damage conviction makes job hunting harder. But I don't regret anything. I would break 1,000 windows to save my daughter. We've moved to a smaller house in a different school district, somewhere without memories lurking in every corner. The garden came with us, transplanted carefully, thriving in new soil. Emma added wind chimes this year, says she likes how they sound like voices keeping watch. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering the sound of her muffled screams through that bathroom door. Sometimes I see Ms. Henderson at the grocery store and have to leave my cart in the aisle and walk out before I do something that will land me back in court. The boys are in college now, their lives moving forward as if nothing happened. But Emma is in college too, building a future from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. And that's what matters. That she survived, that she's still here, still fighting, still becoming whoever she's meant to be despite what they tried to take from her. The other day, Emma told me she's thinking about starting a support group on campus for assault survivors. She wants to create the space she wished had existed for her in those early days. She asked if I thought she was ready, if she was strong enough. I told her she's the strongest person I know, that she's been ready since the day she survived. We sat in her garden as the sun set, listening to the wind chimes, planning how she could help other girls find their voice again. Because that's what you do. You survive first, then you heal, then you help others do the same. This story isn't one I wanted to tell, but it's one I need to share. Because in schools across this country, there are Emmas being failed by systems more concerned with reputation than safety. There are mothers like me being called crazy for protecting their children. There are boys learning that their actions have minimal consequences, while girls learn their safety matters less than avoiding scandal. If you're reading this and you see the warning signs, don't wait for the system to protect your child. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Make noise. Break windows if you have to. Because our daughters deserve better than thoughts and prayers after the damage is done. They deserve protection before it's too late. And to the mothers who've been where I've been, who've held their broken daughters while fighting systems that should have protected them, you are not alone. Your rage is justified. Your actions were necessary. And your daughters are lucky to have warriors for mothers. Even if the world wants to paint us as villains for refusing to be polite while our children suffer. Keep fighting, keep documenting, keep demanding better. Because if we don't protect them, who will? Thank you for listening to our story. If you made it this far, please share this. Not for likes or comments, but because somewhere there's a mother who needs to know she's not crazy for wanting to keep her daughter safe. Somewhere there's a girl who needs to know that what happened to her matters, that people will fight for her, that she deserves justice and healing and a future free from fear. And somewhere there's a school administrator who needs to understand that when a parent says their child is in danger, lunch breaks can wait because our children can't.